Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface. And Father, in our last episode, we talked about the importance of wanting to get closer to Mary. We talked about some ways in which you can go about in doing that and the benefits you get from that. With this being the Jubilee of Hope and trying to pull closer to Jesus, and trying to essentially rely upon Jesus. We've done a couple of episodes about what those kind of hopes look like. We try to do an episode showing that it's hard to put yourself always in autopilot of holiness. Just because you have to consciously put out effort doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. So fish just swim nonstop. They do it instinctually. Okay. People don't instinctually and naturally automatically do what's holy because we have this thing called free will and we make choices. And I wanted to dive a little bit more into that because, as we said many different times, there are virtually an infinite amount of ways that you can interact with another person, and that's why no relationship is the same. None of us are truly the same. But each of us are able to do helpful for each other things in different ways. And I was thinking about an example that you said when you were describing Jesus earlier in the month, when you said that for those looking at him, in all probability, the thing that he was most evident in was his perfection in charity and his perfection in love, which really got me thinking into what is perfection of charity for each of us mean? Because for some people, there is a degree of charity of creating a job so you can hire people or whatever your business is that helps the world. For some people, it's going and volunteering, and which is a completely different economic answer. Literally, one you're trying to make money and the other one you're not. So there's just as there's many different ways and many different personalities, there's also many different ways to do charity. And that's what I wanted to dive into with this episode, was being with charity, how to get better at it, knowing that there's possibly many different answers.
Yeah, and to be clear, when I'm using the word charity, I'm always using it in the technical sense in which we use it in the church, really a translation of the Latin caritas, which is not how most people use charity. So I'm not talking about charity organizations and charity cases and charity banquets and charity other things. So really the perfection of love is probably closer to what's going to be the usage that most people have. Perfected in love. Pope Benedict describes in a radiant way the way that all of those loves, the love of self-emptying service, the love of country, the love of family, the love of friendship, as well as the love of desire and romantic love, how they all find their integration and fulfillment and completion in Christ. So they really are one love. It's not 16 different loves that have a higher synthesis. But anyway, holiness is the perfection of love, is the perfection of so when saying charity, that's what's intended there. Because again, it's being translated, those things are being translated over from Latin and have technical definitions, but the perfection of love is the main thing. So the perfection of love is going to look a little different for people in a different state of life. And as you pointed out, different goods to offer and different ways to serve and different relationships that they're actively engaged in. So we can look at it in positive terms and also in negative terms, what it looks like and what it doesn't look like. The perfection of love doesn't look like cutting off significant sections of the human race as unworthy, uninteresting, unimportant. But the perfection of love expands towards a genuine concern for everyone, as Pope Benedict talks about, again, beautifully in his encyclical God is Love, when he says that it's possible to love those we don't know or don't like because we are able to love them in Christ who really loves everyone. His friend becomes my friend. So even though I haven't met someone, the fact that Jesus found them worthy to shed his blood for, loved enough to come down from heaven to rescue them, sees and holds hope in, is enough for me. I don't need more proof than that, that that person is worthy of love. And so I don't write anyone off as insignificant or justify my own indifference, but rather I cultivate a greater sensitivity towards the needs of all. Now, you only have so much time in the day, and you have to dedicate that time in one way or another. So it's not that I can be the spiritual director for 7 billion people. That would be quite impossible. But I can really care about and love, pray for, and serve for, hope for the best, and for salvation for everyone. And that's going to rub up against people that have hurt me or have hurt people that I love. And how do I reconcile that? So working through the some of those barriers or challenges of the heart is also part of the challenge in being perfected in love. So a little bit of what it's like and what it's not like, and then in terms of our own relationships, it can be really easy to try and figure out, you know, um, I'm just thinking about you and Teresa, and this is entirely my fictitious creation, but any married couple, the man can figure out what the woman wants, or vice versa, in such a way that she doesn't get upset at him. Like, if you don't take the trash out, you're going to get yelled at. And so you take the trash out so you don't get yelled at. But you're not actually pushing farther than that, which is trying to love and understand and be present to. It's like, I'm going to get the things out of the way to prevent being yelled at, and then get back to the things that I really want to do and cultivate my own sort of selfish life. That would be whether in a marriage or in a friendship or in a work environment or something else, rather than, is my heart really oriented to the other? Am I really trying to be attentive to the needs of others? Am I just checking off the boxes so that I can basically live my own selfish life? Or am I really living my life in relationship and loving relationship with others? So those are some ways that we're living out love. And basically the moral law is really establishing justice, but love is the fulfillment of the law, as St. Paul says in Galatians, I believe. Fulfill bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ, Galatians 6:1. So, just being attentive to living out the moral law is part of the expression, the perfection of love.
So there's a lot of different ways you can look at that. And I dive into this in some degrees. It's a very hard topic to break down, the perfection of love, right? Because there's so many different ways we can go about this. Is that, on the one hand, removing things that are negative does lead to a positive. So using your example before, even if it's for selfish means, I don't want to get yelled at, by doing these actions is still a sign of positivity, if for no other reason, by removing negativity. So that if you think of it as like the old number chart with the zero in the middle, getting closer to the positive side is better than staying on the negative side. Even if you're not completely out, a step in the right direction is improvement. So I get that gets to the broader context and what you were talking about, out of just the actions you're doing, into now the motivations behind it. And you started getting to that with your answer, was that being pure of heart and wanting to be able to see it and dealing with certain realities, which is, you're never going to be able to see every person in the world. So how can you adjust yourself? Well, getting rid of things, or maybe creating different thought processes of not just instinctually shooting this person down because they're from a different state than me, or they went to a different college than me, and I only want to be with people who are exactly like me. But opening up your process to being able to say, hey, you're in a different situation than me. I'm not going to, have any barriers. How can I help? And there's obviously natural problems that we have with people. I don't even know if problem is the right word. Barriers that we have with people, because whether we like it or not, we all build our own comfort zones. And something that's outside of that is inherently a moment of conflict with the way that we've built our day-to-day lives. So that's going to give a twinge. For instance, if you're on your way to shuffling the kids to school or whatever, and you see someone asking for money on the side of the road, well, that's not part of your day-to-day. It's not that you dislike or don't want to take care of that person. It's just the realistic thing is your kids have priority, and if this light turns green, I got to gun it because I'm already late. So giving just different examples and thought processes of how there are things that are naturally outside of our comfort zone, but at the end of the day, you didn't help that person by giving them money. You just went when the light turned green. What I'm trying to ask in this is, with knowing that every motivation can be in contrast to the action to the other one. So in this case, the motivation is to get your kids to school on time. So when it turns green, I'm going. But at the other hand, it means that I'm not talking to the person who's asking for money on the side of the road. So my question for this is that right? Is that just to emphasize certain people over others? Because it feels like that's kind of the way we are just to function in life, but it also is contrary to what your original answer is. So how do we balance that tension?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, we can do things in different ways. I don't really want to talk to that person on the side of the road, and so I'm going to justify it by saying I have to get my kids to school. That's different than I would really love to talk to that person on the side of the road. I have deep compassion for them. I'm deeply moved for them. I'm going to actually pray for them, and I might even go back and see if they're there after I get my kids to school. But right now, the priority is to get my kids to school. So those are the same action with very different interior responses. And I think we have to challenge ourselves, be honest with ourselves about what our motivations really are. We justify a lot of things, and in a way, we're using our children to justify our lack of charity. And so we're actually not loving our children well in that case either. Using is the opposite of loving. And so really being honest with where our hearts are, and then it doesn't start with condemnation. We can start with, well, I feel uncomfortable with that person on the side of the road, and I don't know how to interact with them. And what's that bringing up in me? And maybe I don't feel adequate to help them. Maybe I'm afraid to be cheated or manipulated by them. Maybe I'm afraid of what they're going to say to me. It's good to get on the inside of what's happening in our hearts and be honest about that in different situations, and not just sort of live our life justifying ourselves from one thing to another. And again, if it's discomfort, if it's uncertainty, if it's fear, if it's okay, well, that's fine. We don't have to judge any of that or shame ourselves, but we can start by being honest with it, and then maybe there's a path to growth there. Well, maybe I can find out, especially if I'm going to be driving this way and I'm going to see that person over and over again. How am I going to deal with that? Am I just going to be uncomfortable and keep gunning it? What about the time that I'm at the light and I'm not in a rush and I could take some time? What do I do then? So that's the expansion of our hearts to be able to see others, and that's what we want to grow towards. And as we grow towards the perfection of love, the perfection of love is not a matter of just flipping a switch and doing everything right. Making the decision to go against or our inclinations and to do some things that are hard is sometimes limited by our bodies, our nervous system. We may not be able to just overcome the fear of encountering someone who is a stranger and makes us uncomfortable, but we can move in that direction. Again, we can open those places up in prayer. We can talk through those places with good friends. We can start to see what it is that makes us anxious or afraid. And then we can expand our interior freedom. All of that is how we grow in virtue. So virtue is a habit. It's a development of our bodies, our hearts, in a way that we order ourselves to the good, so that it becomes more uh, simple, straightforward, easy, accessible to us. Growing in freedom is a process, and that's a process that is going to grow step by step. But of course, it won't grow if we don't take the first step, and that's where it's good for us to talk about some of these things and at least set some ideals out, and then just be gentle and curious about our hearts and where we might be struggling to live out the charity, the love that we're able to see, but struggle to act on.
And Father, as you said that, a thought just came into my mind that I want to say that might be part of the next episode. We'll see here. But you said about how virtue becomes part of our bodies. It becomes part of our habits and something we exhibit. And it is something that we are all able to see in other people, which means essentially, said another way, your virtuousness is always on display, whether you have it or not, whether you're exercising it or not. Just as if you saw someone walking down the street like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, yeah, that's a powerful guy. He must have exercised a lot. You can tell the same thing with people's virtuousness. You just look for different things rather than biceps. It's just the way that your subconscious is. We all have that ability with each other. And I think that for first of all, I appreciate you going through the actions people can take to go through to deal with this tension of trying to want to be more complete in love, be more perfection in love, and how we can go about that. And knowing that, again, it's not an one-off process. It's not just, oh, we were able to run today. I got the race done. I don't need to worry about this then until next year. It's not just that. It's a continuation perfection. So as we're concluding with this episode, we'd like to thank everyone for taking these actions and putting them into your life, as well as for helping us to grow. We've had a number of listener feedbacks over the last couple of weeks, and we're really glad that we're able to help as many of you as possible. And the only way that happens is by us continuing to grow. So please, if you have not already, share us with someone who could benefit from listening to this. Leave a written review, because that'll leave the Apple to help promote it. And we thank you all for listening, and we will be with you again next week.